Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Leonard W.Lindros Jr. We'll be discussing his fantastic book, Spots and All My Dogs, available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, directly through the publishing company, AuthorReputationPress.com. But also, guys, keep in mind, those are the areas that you have to go to purchase the book. But also check into YouTube.com just by searching his full name. And there's going to be an interview on there on his YouTube page that you can also check out. So one more time, that's available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, AuthorReputationPress.com, and also check out his video on YouTube.com. You know, and I will say Leonard was brought to our network today by some of the best movers in the business, Author Reputation Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, do yourself a favor and contact ARP. And you can find out more information on them at AuthorReputationPress.com. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Leonard, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're very much looking forward to this and all the words that you're going to be able to relay to us. Now, Leonard, I know we have so much information to cover, but before we jump into the book, let's hold off slightly. Start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Well, I was born in the Bronx, New York, that is, 1938, and I was raised in Mount Vernon, New York. From 1946 to 56, I had one foot in Mount Vernon and the other foot in Garrison, New York, where I currently reside. It was about 50 miles north of New York City. My parents had purchased a nice piece of property in Garrison in 46. It was then considered to be the sticks by our friends and family. To us, it was the country, with great air to breathe and spring water to drink. It cleared up my childhood seasonal bronchitis and never returned. We would be in Garrison every weekend and every summer from 46 to 56. And then when I graduated high school in 1956, we moved to Garrison permanently. I was an only child, yes, one of them, and wished that I had brothers and sisters. Not to be, I was it. We grew up like most did in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. Today, looking back, we were all poor, or at best, the very lower of middle class. That's how things were then. No poor me or poor us. That was how everyone was, plain and simple. We worked hard and reached for something better. Well, in today's age, so to speak, it's not all that easy on children and young adults. There is a huge, in my opinion, there is a huge lacking that would help the masses to be more cohesive. There are those who are very wealthy and those that consider themselves poor. In between, we see a shrinking middle class. But in my opinion, we were much happier growing up in our blissful ignorance years ago. We didn't have to contend with a lot of things that we contend with today. Mm-hmm. At my age of 82, I take a little license to be able to pontificate somewhat. And, oh yes, I would have to say that when I was 7 years of age, spots came along. Now, my background is very typical. It's not extraordinary by any means. We talk about growing up, going through school, through college, military, and that's about it. We get married, we had children. I saw to it that my children had a dog. I should have had more, but that's the way it was. So I was in the financial business for 56 years with the same company. I retired twice from them. Finally, I threw the towel in 2019, and I decided, maybe a little bit because of health reasons, I called it a day with that business. What I would do is I dealt with a lot of people. I had several thousand clients with child care agencies, and I learned what the true service means. What truly service is very important. It's a toss that's turned around too loosely, but in a lot of ways, I feel that my dog Spots helped me throughout the years with that very situation. My dog, I would say, taught me how to love animals and love dogs themselves. And this sort of, I would say, how would I put it, went from animals, dogs, to humans. And you learn to love humanity. And that's how I feel about my dog Spots. I was an only child, an only son, and my dog became my brother. I so desperately wanted siblings, and that was not to be. And of course, some people thought it was cute, and other people thought it was weird, but that's how it was. And we were blessed to have him for 13 years. He was a good-sized dog, and I went through, of course, through the military. Everything, I was very normal. Nothing spectacular about me. I was just a so-so student in grade school and also in college. But somehow you get through. But that's about it. I enjoy living where I am. We have been here since 1946, actually. And it's a great spot. I wouldn't have been able to afford this today. When my parents, it's over 4 acres running from the highway down to the Hudson River. They paid a huge price of $2,500. Today, it's worth a lot more zeros. So I'm fortunate, very fortunate.
Absolutely. Leonard, that is incredible. And thank you so much for all of that information. Listen, let's not waste any more time. Let's go. Spots and All My Dogs. Tell us a little bit more about your book. Let's go a little more in detail with it.
Spots came from a litter from one of my parents' friends, and his mother was a Dalmatian, and his father was a Beagle. And yet, Spots was significantly bright, clever, very smart. I mean, most people think their dogs are bright and clever and smart. Some don't think that way, but the dogs really are. But a Dalmatian is considered to be the 68th smartest dog out of a couple hundred, and a Beagle about number 8, the dumbest. But they're beautiful, wonderful dogs. And I don't believe in a dumb dog. It's just like ownership. I don't believe in you own a dog. When they're part of the family, there's nobody in your family that you own. Mm-hmm. They are part of the family, to be loved and cherished. Spots, he would do all types of antics. I mean, he would do things that in those days we didn't have camcorders, or if we had, we wouldn't have been able to afford them. And I wish we had. For instance, we were sleigh riding in the winter of, I think, 48 And the snow, we had so much snow on the ground. That was the winter of 47, 48, that we couldn't use sleds. So on our hills here on the property, we took a large piece of cardboard, and you know what kids do. We packed down the snow and made it like a toboggan run. And we did this, and the dog was jumping all over. He was playful. He was a grown puppy. He was full grown at that point. And after we decided we had enough of this, he grabbed that piece of cardboard, pulled it to the top of the hill, and with his teeth held up the front of that cardboard and came down the hill. Well, he didn't do as good a job as we did coming down, following back down roof, but he actually did this under his own. And wow. My family and my aunt and uncle were there, and they watched the whole thing. Dogs today can do that, but they're trained to do that. Spots did it on his own initiative. And also Spots, there's many chapters on Spots, but one of the chapters is how he literally helped saved my family and myself. We used to come up on a Friday evening and summer, and we were here all summer, but fall, spring, and summer, and winter rather. And we would get the coal stove going. We built a garage. My father built it in 1946, and we lived in that garage until about 1954, when most of our house was completed. And we used to live in the garage on weekends and summers. So we would come up here and we would get the stove going and then get the coal on it and then go and have some dinner. In those days, we could get a huge hamburger at a local friend's place and a lot of French fries for 50 cents. Times have changed. And then we would come back. Well, this particular night, we came up on a Friday night, the coal bin was empty. Our coal fella forgot to fill it. And after all, we were just very small. He was a great guy, and we certainly didn't fault him for that. But Dad and I went down to the tracks, the railroad tracks, and we picked coal because the steam engines used to spew out the coal. But now this was soft coal. And we came up and we broke up the chunks and we used it like regular anthracite. This was bituminous. Well, that night it was over 20 below zero. And we had what was called an air inversion. And what it did was, at about 2 or 3 in the morning, the coal gas backed up into the room rather than being expelled through this chimney. And the next thing, I was on a very low bed, a day bed, and the next thing I knew was Spots had crawled on his belly, and he came over to my bed, and he licked my face. He woke me up, and all I could see, everything was like a dream. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. And with that, my mother got out of their bed and walked across the concrete floor and got to the door. And as she went to grab the handle, she passed out and went straight back on her head. I can still hear the noise to this day.
Oh, my goodness.
She came to, but Spots was over there licking her face. I could see everything happening, but there's nothing I could do. She came to again, got up, and went to open the door again and fell straight back again. She wound up with not a concussion, but a fractured skull. And Spots continued to wake her. And this time she came to and crawled over to the door and opened the door up. And as soon as that fresh, cold air hit us, we came to. So the 4 of us, my folks, myself, and Spots, we all went to the local hospital where they treated us for carbon monoxide hemoglobin. And I believe very strongly that if it wasn't for Spots, I wouldn't be doing this interview right now. So that's one of the chapters.
This is all incredible, and what an amazing story. You know, I'm curious. Let's go to the concept of inspiration. So all of these stories, And these memories very easily could have just been kept to yourself and something that you verbally told those around you and your loved ones. But you didn't stop there. You wanted to put all of this into a book and put it out for the public to partake in as well. What inspired you to do that?
Well, over the years, I had, what I would say, I've written some written notes down. And really, everybody, I think, at some time in their life said, I wish I could write a book, or I should write a book. And I probably said the same thing, too. This is going to be for future years. And I don't think I really was ever going to do it. But I had both written and mental notes. And I found, of course, Spots to be so spectacular that he really was my daughter's dog, because my daughter was born 10 years before my son. I always used to tell people it took us 10 years to figure out what we did right in the first time. But that was just a little inside joke there. At any rate, there's so many chapters on what he would. We would go, when we were living in Mount Vernon during the weekdays, and we would go out at night, and we would put the cushions up on the sofas. We had a couple sofas and whatever, armchairs, and so that he wouldn't be sitting on them. When we would come home at night, he was behind one of the sofas. He was growling and wagging his tail because he knew what was coming. He was going to be scolded. Never hit, but scolded. You don't have to hit a dog. There's no reason for that. And when we looked, every cushion would be down in place. Not only did he sleep in one of them, he was on every one, just to show us that's what you do when you go out and leave me. And so Mom would scold him, but he knew damn well that she wasn't really scolding him. She would just say, Spots, that's a bad boy. And then he didn't like to be scolded. So one of the things he would do, and he did it many times, he would come out from behind. He would go over to the magazine rack and pull out the bottom magazine and dump the whole works. Again, just showing him, don't mess with me. So he also was a very strong guardian of both children. Of course, my daughter, who was about 7 years old when. Wait, I'm jumping ahead here. That's Nikki. I got the story screwed up. Excuse me. That's Nikki. This was Spots. My daughter wasn't anywhere close to being born, nor was my son. That's a whole different story. He messed around. He did what dogs do when they're on land that's got a lot of woods. He had to go and wrap himself up with a skunk. And that was an interesting evening and the next several days.
I can't help but, as you're going through and you're listing all of these stories, it just brings me down memory lane with my own pets growing up, right? And my own dogs that I've had. And, getting caught with the battle with the skunk is something that has happened a number of times with previous dogs that I've had. So this is something that, again, it's so nostalgic. And I think that that's where so much of the power lies in your book. Because we, as your listening audience, we as your readers, we can resonate, right? We connect with the stories that you're telling because we've been there ourselves. And I love that you were able to formulate that connection with your audience. Listen, as we start to close out of this fantastic interview, I'm curious, with writing this book, what would you say was a highlight for you? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting prior to embarking upon the journey?
Well, it took me an entire year. It wasn't overnight. And actually, it's not just Spots. I involve a lot of dogs that touched my life. As I was writing this, I decided that I was not only going to do Spots, but I was going to do my children's dogs, my grand dogs, my neighbors and friends' dogs, and all the dogs that came through my property or whatever that touched my life. I became what you might call a dog whisperer. And what I did learn, though, is that I was neglectful. I should have, at least within a year's time or year, I should have gone out and rescued another dog or maybe two. I had enough property for it. But I was so hurt. I'll tell you, when I took my daughter's dog, Nicky, to his last trip to the veterinarian, I was out in that parking lot. I cried my eyes out. I just didn't want to ever go through that again. But I should have grown up and did it. After all, I was a grown man. And I should have given all these years just to think of the amount of love that I could have shared with so many dogs. But no, I was sort of the dog lover with everybody else's dog. And there was a lot of them. And I sort of let them be the Grim Reaper, which I should have never been. And of course, when I was writing this book, you realize that my condition and everything, it's just far too late. I have a serious health condition, but my children made up for my error. My children, well, my son right now, they have 3 dogs. Oh, wow. My daughter, they've had 3 dogs. Each time one passed away, they got another one, but they always left like a year for mourning. And that's how I feel. You got to leave some time, because even though people say, well, a human being dying is more important than a dog dying, obviously that must be true. But nevertheless, there's a mourning that goes on. My next door neighbor with his dogs, he has chihuahuas. They had one at a time. He didn't even want to come home when Daisy passed away. He didn't want to walk into the house without her being there. And I know exactly how he felt. So I learned in writing this book that I was remiss in my ways about having dogs, more dogs. And in this book, I write about a lot of dogs and the family dogs and dogs that I've grown up with, that I've known, and dogs that would just come through. We had dogs that would come through every day, and you got to know them. And so one dog, catch this one. One of my niece's dogs, he's what's called a double doodle. He's got a full-grown, what do you call it, a doodle, what's the dog I'm trying to think of? On both sides, both the father and the mother were, oh my God, Benji, you got to help me here.
Are you talking about a poodle?
Poodle, thank you. And they would both, one side had because today, we do DNA with the dogs. Yeah, so you know what their background is. And anyway, this dog grew up to a large-sized dog, very big, wonderful. I mean, all dogs are just wonderful, wonderful critters. And after a year of, I hate to use the word owning, but having this dog, he was wetting in the house, even though he was housebroken. And they took him to the vet and see what was wrong with him. And he said, no, you're overwatering him. And he said, what do you mean overwatering? He said, well, dogs can sometimes they graze food, but they also graze water. And you can't have that happen. So he sent them home with the dog, and they closed all the toilets, seats down and only gave him enough water during the day and then took it away and gave, in other words, they gave him portions throughout the day. Mm-hmm. Now, it's very important that dogs have water like any animal because of the kidneys. But the dog continued to wet, and they couldn't understand. One day they found out, and they have him on film. He was up on the refrigerator with both paws, and where the ice and the water come out, he had his head under there, and he was slamming the button. He was drinking water and taking ice cubes. So that shows you they're very smart.
Absolutely. That is hilarious. Guys, you know what I love so much about this is, listen, we've come to the end of the interview now. We've discussed so much, but yet we've barely scratched the surface. There's still so much left to be discovered, and that's why the onus is on you now. There's no getting around it. Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, AuthorReputationPress.com are the places you have to go. Spots and All My Dogs is the title you have to pick up, and Leonard W.Lindros Jr. is the author you have to thank for bringing it to your table. And while you're at it, make sure to check into his YouTube page just by searching his name and looking up the interview that he has on there as well. You surely will not be disappointed. Leonard, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
And Benji, I thank you very much.